In higher ed, we're all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Bettersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution.
As a student, they were like, hey, make a strategy and post on social media. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I'm really stressed, but I'm happy to do that, happy to rise up to the challenge. And one of the things I felt like was lacking was using social media as an admissions and recruitment tool. And so when I was kind of given free rein to make a strategy when there wasn't really one, that's an area I really wanted to expand upon because I felt like that would have been useful in my admissions process when I was a high schooler myself.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 66 of the Mission Admissions podcast. According to a recent report from the Pew Research Center, more than 50% of teenagers say they visit or use Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all three of them, at least once a day. 45% of teenagers also describe their social media use as excessive. Despite all that data, I continue to find that the majority of colleges and universities are not syncing their social media and admission strategies during the student recruitment process. Hopefully my conversation today with Hannah Downey will help to change that. So Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so Hannah, we've already established that a lot of Gen Z practically lives on social media. For admissions and marketing teams who, for whatever reason, right, whether it's budget, bandwidth, principles, whatever it is, they just haven't prioritized aligning their social media strategy with their admission strategies to help with student recruitment. What's the biggest thing or what's the biggest opportunity, Hannah, like they're missing out on because they're not doing that?
I think the biggest thing that those people are missing out on is the opportunity to connect with students in a way that they are already there. So like you said, students are on social media all the time. They say their social media use is excessive. And so if you're not posting on the channels that they're on, you're missing out on this really authentic way to connect with them on a platform that they're already spending a lot of time on. I think the other opportunity you're missing out on is the opportunity for two-way communication. So much prospective student communication is us sending stuff to them. So us sending postcards, us sending emails, and it doesn't allow the opportunity for a lot of two-way communication, but social media is at its heart meant to be social. So it's meant to be two-way communication. So some of our best two-way communication with prospective students comes from social media, and a lot of it is really celebratory. So that's where we spend a lot of time congratulating students on confirming to come to the University of Wyoming, or sharing when they get their admitted letter. And we're able to like enjoy and spend time with them in that happy moment.
So, what else there? You gave an example, which I appreciate. What else besides celebrating when they make their admissions decision? You talked about two-way communication, Hannah. What are some other examples, if you're comfortable sharing, that you guys have seen work well?
I see a lot of students message us, so DM us on Instagram or Facebook asking questions in the admissions process. And so this might be early in the process when they haven't yet connected with an admissions rep, or they don't even know that admissions rep exists. And so I kind of can be that first entry point to answer some of these questions for them. And then that ultimately can get them connected to other people on the team and the more official admissions team. So I can be that kind of that first step for them in terms of messages. We also see a lot of students commenting, especially on our TikTok, that they decided to apply to the university because of a TikTok they saw, which seems crazy, but it happens. And so we can comment back and be like, hey, we're here for the process. We're excited for you on this journey. And so those are just a few other examples of like where we're getting a lot of two-way communication.
Well, and it makes sense when you think about all the data, Hannah, which is students are emotional just like the rest of us, and they go through this process. And while logic absolutely plays a role, like emotionally, they're looking for community, they're looking for connections, right? And, they can find that a whole bunch of places, right? Including on social media. So you answered one of the things I was going to ask you as I was listening to you talk. There was a follow up, which is okay. So two-way communication's happening, whether it's on your Insta, whether it's on your TikTok, YouTube, wherever it is, right? Who besides you is ultimately monitoring those channels every day? Is it other strategists who work again for the admissions or marketing office? Is it that and some students? I know you have, we'll talk about your Tik turns later, where you've got some student ambassadors who help you with TikTok stuff. Who's ultimately monitoring that? And like, all right, if I'm a prospective student at IDM, do you introduce yourself as, hey, like I'm a social media strategist at Wyoming? Like, talk to us about how that like dialogue tends to typically play itself out.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm pretty much the primary person managing that. And so when I was first starting in my role, it did require me to gain a lot of knowledge about the admissions process and departments and things on campus so that I could effectively answer questions without having to bug the admissions team every time a student was asking us a question in our DMs, which happens really frequently. So I've had to really educate myself on the admissions process so I can answer those questions effectively. Yeah, and then like you said, we have our Tik turns, who are two students who we refer to lovingly as our Tik turns. That their primary job is managing our TikTok account. So they are interacting a lot on there and commenting to students in a way that feels like really authentic and uses some Gen Z slang words that I don't understand. And so they comment back and forth there. So those are primarily who's managing it. If I really can't answer a question, I'll kind of bring in our admissions team or direct them to them. And when I'm answering those questions, I'll usually just put my name at the end and say like Hannah. So it adds that personal aspect, like you're thinking, because I think a lot of people don't even realize that when they message a brand, like an actual person is answering the question. So I do like to add that personalization, but I don't get too in depth into my role or anything like that. When I was a student myself and I first started in my role, I started as a student intern. I would introduce a lot that I was a student to the fellow students, so they knew that I was understanding where they were coming from, and I was a current student myself.
What are, if they're top of mind, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, what are some of those top questions that you typically get, especially earlier in the process, if you're mindful of that? Because when this episode gets released, I know a lot of admissions and marketing people listening to it will be starting to think about that rising senior or that next class.
Yeah, I would say one of our biggest group of students that actually message us most frequently is international students. And I think because they're kind of disconnected from what the college process looks like in the US and they don't really know how to navigate that, they start by just reaching out on social media. That's a really easy place for them to start. So that's a huge group of students that we see messaging us. So I connect them with our international office just because international students, it can vary so greatly in terms of where they're coming from. And a lot of them want to know about scholarships and those opportunities. And so the message allows for that more personal communication with our international team that can help provide that next step to help get the student here. Then for our like domestic students, just kind of standard first year students, we see a lot of messages about scholarships. That's always like one of the most important things. So being able to link them to our scholarship page and more information. A lot of them don't really know how to apply or what the next steps are. So we received some of those questions as well. I feel like over time, because we've been posting more about admissions topics on our main page, some of those questions have decreased just in the sense that we are answering that information for them upfront before they even have the question, but then they know that we're there if they have other things they want to cover. And I would say we're really like the first kind of line, and then we're able to direct them to the next best step or the next best resource, and they don't have to try to go seek that out themselves.
So let's talk about this collaboration, right? You talked about, hey, I had to get some training from the admissions team here so that I could answer a lot of those, right? FAQs, those frequently asked questions, and feel like, there's a lot of things where I don't always have to run to them as myself or the tick turns, right? Might be responding to DMs and things. You all have created over the last few years a very seamless process where like your print, your physical, and your like digital voices, they all basically match. Walk us through how that collaboration initially began between essentially the marketing or social media group there and the admissions team.
Yeah, it's actually just a crazy story how it ultimately came together. So I started as a student intern with institutional marketing in January of 2020. So at that time, I was a student myself, and there really wasn't an established social media team at the University of Wyoming. So this has all been really recent progress for us. And I, as a student, they were like, "Hey, make a strategy and post on social media." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great. I'm really stressed, but I'm happy to do that. Happy to rise up to the challenge." And one of the things I felt like was lacking was using social media as an admissions and recruitment tool. And so when I was kind of given free reign to make a strategy when there wasn't really one, that's an area I really wanted to expand upon because I felt like that would have been useful in my admissions process when I was a high schooler myself, which hadn't, was just a few years before. And so then I was invited to join the admissions and marketing meetings, and social media wasn't talked about. Nobody really cared at first. So I used that opportunity to just take notes and really ingrain myself in the information and understand the admissions process as the admissions team saw it. I used it to take notes on what we were sending through print, what we were sending through those other mediums. And then I ultimately just kind of took the ownership of adding those topics or messages into our social media channel at the same time that they were going out through those other mediums. And after doing that for about a year, we were able to see like good success and having a little bit more relationship between what we were sending through print and email and texting, and then also what we were sending through our organic social media and also our digital advertising, so that a student was getting a holistic view from a variety of different areas. And then now I work really closely with the admissions team. They message me ideas. They'll say, "Hey, I saw this thing I want to do." A lot of our admissions reps are on social media quite a bit. So they'll message me trends or things that they've seen that they want to do. And so after kind of that year of test running it, I was really able to show the benefit, and we were able to have, more people want to be involved and kind of get behind it.
So I mentioned earlier that all of your, we'll say voices, that's the word I'll use, are aligned, right? It's just the way you communicate, right? The language, the tone. If you had to pick a few words, Hannah, to describe what kind of, we'll say voice, right, Wyoming uses as they talk with prospective students through those different channels, what words would you pick?
Yeah, I would say we really go for like a friendly, approachable voice so that we're not being too kind of corporate or salesy, but we're really showing like students an authentic experience. Our mascot is the Cowboys, so sometimes we do really lean into like the Western kind of language while not going too cowboy, as I like to say. Sometimes I'll say a caption is too cowboy. I'd also say we really try to go for that authentic language. Like as you mentioned before, I think Gen Z can really sense when things feel fake or they don't feel real, and they kind of shy away from it. They don't want to, involve themselves with it. And so we really attempt to be like authentic and genuine in our communication to students so that they know that we're being real with them and they're not just getting this like fake corporate message from us because we want them to come here. We want them to be part of the experience. We want them to understand what the University of Wyoming is and feel like they could really see themselves fitting in here.
So that friendly, relaxed, we'll say less formal language and tone, right, that you talked about there. Was that easy in terms of getting buy-in from like admissions leadership and marketing leadership, or were they kind of like, I don't know if we can like talk down on their level, Hannah?
I think it's taken time, with any sort of change, people can kind of be adverse at first to something different. But I think with time, it's been easier to kind of explain and show that this group of students is really looking for something different than previous groups of students are. And we need to be accommodating to that so that we can reach them where they're at and in a way that they're going to understand and engage with, because we can send a bunch of postcards or post a bunch of things on social media. But if the message isn't feeling authentic to the student, if it's not resonating with them in language that they use, then it's going to fall on deaf ears anyway. And so, how can we meet them where they're at? So, there's definitely emails or postcards or social media posts that do still use more, I would say, kind of like corporate or salesy kind of language, because some of the topics require it, like financial aid. That's one that it can be a bit tougher to boil down to some Gen Z slang, but there's definitely those opportunities when we're talking about campus visits or events that we're hosting that we can use more of that, like a friendly, approachable language.
Where do all of your content ideas come from?
Yeah, I would say it's like a combination of a lot of people and a lot of involvement. And I would say one of my biggest hopes is that we can be collaborative, because as the University of Wyoming, social media strategist, I'm representing the whole university brand. And I don't know everything about the university, even though I've been here for a long time. And so it's about connecting all of these different groups. So when I'm working with our social media team to plan our content, we kind of use the term content pillars or topics. So once a week, we always post about admissions. And once a week, we always post about current student content. And then that gives us a few days to kind of have fun or play around or post about other events on campus or a cool research thing that's taking place. And so we take the admissions topic and then we time that with the content that's going out on those other platforms. So yeah, a lot of it is listening at the admissions meetings and seeing what they're thinking about or what's on students' mind or what they're sending out. Like I said, I get a ton of ideas from the admissions reps. A lot of them are younger. They kind of fit into that Gen Z, older millennial age range themselves. So they see a lot of trends on their own social media and will share those with me and really will help execute too. Yeah, a lot of reps will just message me and be like, hey, we've been getting a lot of questions about our Child of Alumni scholarship, for example. Can we do a post about it? And so then we were able to come together with an idea and make that happen. The topic method is also really helpful because then you can kind of reuse topics year to year. As everyone listening knows, the admission cycle is very cyclical. It's the same thing every year. We start to talk early in August about campus visits, about some of that stuff, and then in the later December timeframe, it's more of a push for applying. Then in the spring, we're focused on getting those confirmations or having students feel comfortable with what those next steps are. And so making those topics now every year, we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel in terms of what the topics are. They're pretty similar. And instead we can spend that creative energy focusing on a more exciting way to share that topic. So how can we share about campus visits in a way that we haven't before or using a trend that we're seeing? So that's where we get a lot of ideas. And then honestly, I think just being open, like the students come to me with a lot of ideas and sometimes they seem a little out there and I'm like, oh, I might get fired for this one, but it's worth like pushing the boundaries and like letting them have that freedom. And I am not the current target market. It's current or, prospective students. And so our current students have a much better pulse on what a prospective student is going to care about and want to see than what I care about and want to see as a staff member. And so definitely have been open to a lot of wild ideas. And so far, none of them have gotten me in trouble. So
the next era of higher ed is here. AI that's both scalable and deeply human. At the 2025 Engage Summit, learn how to use agentic AI to personalize outreach, engage proactively, and free time for what matters most. This don't miss event is happening June 24th and 25th in Charlotte, and Enrollify listeners get $50 off with code Enrollify50. Don't wait. Register at engage.element451.com. Well, and I love that you talked about being open, right, to ideas that absolutely are coming from students at Wyoming, which I would argue are going to be as relatable for your target audience as any content you produce. I love that you talked about pushing the boundaries, right? Talk to me about how, whatever you're comfortable sharing again, like how easy or how hard has that been for you, Hannah? Because to your point, well, I don't want to get fired. Where's the balance if someone's listening to this going, okay, cool, I have all kinds of ideas, Hannah, but like I'm afraid to bring any of those to a meeting because my boss is going to look at me and go, that's either dumb or you can't do that. Talk to me about that.
yeah, I feel really lucky in the sense that a lot of team members that I work with, both in marketing and admissions, realize that they are maybe not the savviest in social media. And so they do put a lot of trust in me and my expertise when it comes to social media. So I do feel lucky in that I have that kind of starting place to begin with. But it obviously took time to build that trust, especially when I was just starting as a student intern, that I had to get a lot more things approved and kind of ran by people than I do now. And I would say to start simple. You are not going to jump from never posting a trend to posting, a really out there trend, like the one that's going around recently that's like, I'm so hungry, I could eat blank. And then you say someone's name and it's kind of like a prank. Like that's going to be way too far of a jump for a brand that's like never posted anything trendy to begin with. So I would say there's kind of like levels of trends, and some of them are way more out there and some of them are easier to kind of get a grasp on. So I like to talk about these like hype style videos. And so those are just using a trending audio that might be going around, and you just put a bunch of different videos in there to kind of show off the campus or show off the student experience. And that can be a really good first step to start to post something that's maybe a little bit outside the corporate norm that uses that trending audio, but isn't so out there that somebody is going to say, oh, I don't know about that. And then honestly, you have to know your audience and know your platform. So like we are not posting crazy trends on Facebook. Like that is not where that's going to resonate. Parents don't want to see that. It's not going to resonate with them. It's not going to resonate with like our board of trustees or stakeholders or other people that are on that platform. And so it's about knowing that like TikTok is the platform where we can ultimately push the boundaries the most, because that's mostly students following us on there. And then Instagram, we can start to push the boundaries some. So one of my favorite trends that we have done in I think it was last year. Yeah, it was the Orlando baby that was going around. So the little baby that said, who wants to go to the Four Seasons Orlando? And he says, me. And we took that and applied it to the university brand and actually used that as a push for confirmations. So students, putting down their confirmation deposit and taking those next steps. And it performed super well and people loved it. It was shared widely. We got a lot of views and engagement on it. And so that's a great example of how those trends can be ultimately useful, but you're not going to jump from never doing it to the Orlando baby. There's probably some happy mediums to start to dip your feet in. And then now we can post those trends freely and nobody is, questioning me.
How are you and your colleagues evaluating like what's working? That didn't work, or land the way we were hoping. What does that process look like if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah. So a lot of the stats that we look at in terms of social media, the ones that I kind of feel to prioritize is reach or impressions, and then engagement rate, and of course like link clicks. So those are like the main three metrics that I'm looking at. About once a week, I meet with the admissions team. And so during those meetings, I'll look back at the metrics for last week and use that opportunity to share it with the admissions team. And that also gives me the opportunity to kind of more real time see what posts performed well and what posts didn't. That impression reach number is about how many people are actively seeing the post. So that's an important number just to see, like, are we reaching a broader audience? Is the content, getting out to people? That engagement rate is a really important metric because it kind of takes it to the next level. So not only did somebody see the content, but they saw the content and they chose to engage with it, whether that's via a like, a comment, a share, or a save. And so that engagement rate number, I actually pulled a stat from our 2024-2025 recruitment, so that one that we're ending right now. And of all of our admission specific posts, our engagement rate was 6.2%. And an average engagement rate in higher ed is between 1% and 3%, kind of across the various platforms. So I was actually impressed and pretty proud of our team for having such a high engagement rate. And a lot of that engagement was actually coming from shares and saves, which can be a really important metric for prospective students because the college search process is a long process. There's lots of steps involved. And so if a student is sharing or saving a piece of content, then they are looking at it, saving it for later, wanting to look back at it. So while, they're scrolling probably while they're supposed to be listening in class. So they're not going to take that call to action or that next step right now, but they're saving it to do later. Or somebody that is playing a role in influencing the student's decision, whether that's a parent, a family member, a sibling, shares the content with the student. So that's like another area that you're reaching by that share metric. So we look a lot at those as well. Link clicks are important too. So we've definitely seen uptick in our link clicks for like application, a lot of our events that we host. So we post a lot of links to register for those. And so we've seen upticks in all of those. I would say a lot of people will get really discouraged when a post maybe doesn't perform as well as they want or, isn't performing how they expected. And so much of social media is a lot of trial and error. So even if you post something and it doesn't do as well as you think, like that's okay. Try something different. And then honestly, it ebbs and flows so much. So we were having video content perform super, super well for many, many months. We posted a few carousels on Instagram, so kind of the more collection of photos just to see how they performed. And those honestly started to perform really well compared to our video content. And so, it's always about just posting, different things, trying different things, because you never know what's going to work in social media. And like nobody has, even if they try to tell you, nobody has like the secret key or the answer or the one thing that's going to work on social media, because the algorithm is changing all the time. Your brand is different all the time. And so it's just about being open to trying new things and seeing what works.
All right, Hannah, the last thing I do on every podcast is something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a whole bunch of questions and I want to get some quick feedback and thoughts from you on each, okay?
Okay.
What's the biggest myth about the University of Wyoming when you're like, where did this come from? It's not true.
I think it's that Wyoming doesn't exist. And so people don't even think that there's a university here. So we play into that lore a bit.
All right, what's your biggest guilty TikTok pleasure?
Oh, just scrolling far too long on book talk instead of actually reading my book.
Rumor has it you like to play pickleball. It's the hardest thing for new players to learn about pickleball.
I mean, I'm not very good at pickleball, so I think the hardest thing for people to learn is probably the rules and the coordination, but honestly, just go for it.
Favorite book you've read in the last year?
Oh no, I've read so many. This is a hard one. I would say The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Okay. And if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who are you going to dinner with?
Oh no, I don't know. This
First
is too big of
person
a
that pops in
question.
your brain.
My dad.
Your dad. I love it. I love it. Well, Hannah, I appreciate you being on and sharing so much today that I think is going to help a lot of people. And the biggest thing that I want to reiterate to everybody listening that Hannah said is just don't be afraid to push some boundaries. There's a way you can do that without pushing the envelope too far in terms of being able to speak on behalf of, I'll say, prospective students and explain why you want to look at, potentially posting a video on a social media platform or change the tone and language, right, of the voice that you all are communicating with. Don't be afraid to stand up and have some of those conversations. They're not always going to work out in your favor, but I think it's an important thing, right, Hannah?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, those changes happen slowly. And so just asking a little bit every few months is a great way to kind of start to push those conversations and push those boundaries in terms of what you can do in the future. Yeah. And I always just say be open to what might happen next. And you never know.
Hannah, thanks again for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.